Natasha Khan is somebody you might well know, the creative spirit who performs as Bat for Lashes. She was nominated for the Mercury Music Prize for her haunting music on the 2006 album Fur and Gold, and for her album of 2009 called Two Sons, which featured the Ivor Novello-winning Daniel, and a song called Laura, which was nominated for another Ivor Novello Award. She's used characters in her songs throughout her career, and her fourth album, The Bride, tells the tragic tale of a would-be bride and reflects on our ideas of idealised marriage. So is this the dreaded concept album?
I don't know if it's a concept album in the traditional sense, like a prog rock theatrical escapade. I feel like I've created my own little genre and I've been describing it as storytelling.
Tomorrow you will ask me if I do.
I've used characters a lot and I love to use metaphor and archetypes and storytelling in my albums. I think this was just the most concise and realised version of a story that I'd ever attempted.
Like dew from a flower.
The story is about a woman who is proposed to. She's going to marry the love of her life. So at the very beginning, she's extremely excited of this idea that this romantic ritual will occur and her dreams will come true and she'll be saved, and there's kind of that fairy tale setup.
When you say I do.
We start with the track I Do. How would you describe I Do?
There's just a very hopeful, naive, sparkling, heightened romantic energy to that song. It starts very high, in that kind of high adrenaline-fueled, in love, emotional space.
Intoxicating, the whole thing.
And all of the grey skies will blow away.
Then it's tragedy. How does the mood change?
The second song is called Joe's Dream, and it's where her lover comes to her the night before they're to be married and explains that he's had this terrible foreboding dream or message that something bad's going to happen.
There's a tear in my lover's eyes. He's at my window, it's a gloomy night.
By the time the third song comes around, she's in the church. It's called In God's House, and she's waiting, and she also has this terrible premonition.
In God's house, I do wait for my love on our wedding day. Dewy eyes and lashes long.
But unfortunately, her fiancé is killed on the way to the wedding in a crash. It's very melodramatic. And so she embarks on this honeymoon alone, on this journey where the very person that's going to help her fulfill this marriage ritual is taken away.
Put cans on the road and tail lights. And your empty seat by my side. If I drive far enough, will I find my love?
I was just really interested about what happens when that construct is broken down. If you go on honeymoon alone, is it just you that you can fall in love with? I just thought it was a really interesting narrative within which to explore ideas about love and self-love and our expectations of relationships, the dark night of the soul, themes like grief and all of that.
Pining for your warmth and your smile.
Marriage can be wonderful, but it isn't the solution to all life's problems, is it?
No, and I think we are sometimes sold that in films and mainstream mass culture. And fairy tales, you know, even since I was a little girl, I was fed Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and all those things. So it starts with that sort of initial ideal, and then getting a bit deeper and taking that away, I think, is really important. I was studying screenplays and script writing at the time because I directed a short film whilst I was making the album. And I think there was something about tragedy hitting quite early on, so you're on the journey. There's a catalyst to push your protagonist forward into this dark road trip of the soul. And I think I was thinking about Rebel Without a Cause and those teenage musicals and dramatic storylines, bands like the Shangri-Las, all that sort of
the ones about
love
people dying in accidents.
Yeah,
yes.
There's that tragedy to it, which is very alluring and intoxicating for me. There's definitely that dark, sad aspect.
See her in blue eyes, numb and shining, in the face of strangers, in the city lights.
I'd been working with my collaborator Neil Krug, who ended up doing all the visual artwork with me, and we sort of created this visual storyboard. I build up a sketchbook actually that incorporates lists of books, photography,
like a mood
exhibitions
board.
I've been to. Yeah, it's kind of like a documentation process. And there's scraps of poems and lyric ideas and drawings, tons of films, tons of artists, tons of photographers, loads of books. It's a very multi-layered thing, and I've actually got loads of these now, and it's really nice to look back on them.
And you got a wedding dress for this album?
Yes. I bought a 1930s long train silk one that was very sort of gothic literature at the very beginning, and as it evolved for the album, it sort of ended up being an off-the-shoulder 90s trashy affair. So it progressed, but I think that's why sketchbooks and things like that are so important, because you document that process and you see that it evolves and it has roots and foundations from which it comes. And we said, look, we want to work with the visuals alongside the music. I really enjoyed using that method because it's very three-dimensional.
On a road forever, he will be riding to me.
How personal is this whole unfolding drama?
Every album I do has been deeply personal, even though I use characters and stories to discuss these issues. I find it very hard to separate it. Sometimes the use of storytelling and metaphor is a really useful way of actually getting much deeper than I could if I was being confessional.
So you're not particularly confessional in your songwriting?
I think it's very confessional, but it's not. I just find when I'm writing, it comes from such a deep soul place, and it really filters through my own experience and my own heart, and I put everything into it, and I try to make music that just feels very truthful. Sometimes that makes me very vulnerable and exposed, and so often I'll think of stories and ways to kind of encompass that or to hold the emotional space. I think that allows me to be very real, and a lot of these songs and stories are very personal and real, and if you just scratch the surface, they do talk about things that I've been through myself.
On a road forever, he will be riding to me.
The mood of the album is love, loss, grief, and then a kind of resolution. Towards the end, your central character is beginning to feel slightly happier.
The track for me that's the most emotional and resonates quite deeply is If I Knew. It's like a thank you love letter to her dead boyfriend. It's the moment in the story where she realises what true love is, and it's actually not what she thought. She's thanking his spirit for sort of accompanying her through this journey of self-discovery and shining and beaming unconditional love at her. And she's always felt that he's very happy and supportive of her to go on this journey, to actually realise that once she loves herself, she will be able to move forward in a much more mature and grounded and three-dimensional place.
Baby, if I knew what I know now,
And so she says, if I knew what I know now, I'd never turn it back around.
I would never turn it back around.
Wrong or right, you held me up to the light, and the mountain had a mirror inside. That's the place she's going. And where I was going just took time.
The mountain had a mirror inside, and where I was going took time.
And so by the end of the story, she does reach this peak, and it's kind of got that Wizard of Oz Emerald City thing where she gets to this place that he's mapped out for her on the honeymoon map. and the mountain slides open and it's just a mirror and she just does see herself. And so, it's quite emotional. I feel quite sad just talking about it.
You've performed it, haven't you, in churches, which I imagine fits really, really well, that kind of baroque by candlelight.
It sort of lends that very theatrical, sacred, gothic cinema quality to it, which I think the album does have a bit of a soundtrack feel to it. And it also allows me to come down the aisle with my veil and my bouquet. Everybody standing up and all the guests have been invited to dress as wedding guests. I would love to continue that sort of theatrical happening.
So fans could attend your wedding, dress up.
My doomed wedding.
Your doomed wedding. And then just descend into this pit of despair, but with the little flicker of resolution at the end.
It was like a wedding, like people were coming to my wedding, and it was highly emotional. As the years have gone by and I'm now on my 4th album, I feel quite comfortable with the niche I've carved for myself. I think now I do feel that I've reached a place where I feel quite comfortable as a storyteller and someone who likes to go deep. I like to mine those emotional landscapes and take people on a journey.
What would you do after this?
What do I want to do next? I'm writing the novella of The Bride, which I hope to be adapted for screenplay, because I'd love to make a feature-length, surreal, sort of dark musical. There's plenty of things I want to do on many levels. I'm quite excited just to approach creativity from quite a multi-layered perspective and not just confine it to doing the music. I think I'm more than just a musician, and even though that's what I'm known for, there's so many other things I want to do.
Natasha Khan, aka Bat for Lashes, and the new album The Bride is out now, and you can also see an exhibition of her artwork at the Sonos Studios in London. So to